Welcome, everyone. It's Angelo Robles, host of the Angelo Robles podcast, and we're Family Office on YouTube. I'm also the founder at Family Office Association. Today, we're really excited to have on an amazing entrepreneur doing amazing things and soon to be going public. So it really is tremendous insights into the mindset of an entrepreneur and building and expanding a great company. So we're calling it The Mindset of an Entrepreneur. It features Tim Hentschel. Tim is the co-founder and CEO of HotelPlanner and Meetings.com, the world's largest online group travel provider. Tim, welcome to the show.
Hi, Angelo. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great. I'm really honored. I've been a big fan of what you guys have been doing for years, and to actually talk and learn from the man himself really is going to be great for me and my audience. Like I always try to say from my style, I guess you could say, is I just want to be curious. I'm interested in people that I talk to and want to learn from them to not only grow and expand what I do, but hopefully impart great information to people that listen. I've given a couple of speeches at colleges here in Connecticut and New England. And more younger people are following our platform and channel. And by far the most common is someone that approaches me from the college or more youthful perspective, and of course wants to be an entrepreneur. Sometimes I try to talk them out of it. It's a hell of a road. But that's a little bit of a test, because if they don't listen to me, then yeah, they're probably going to be a good entrepreneur at the end of the day. So on that note, that's perfectly queuing up. Why don't we get right to it? What in your mind prepares someone to be an entrepreneur?
Well, I don't really believe you could be truly prepared. It's a small group of people, as you know, that end up taking on the mantle of entrepreneur. And there's just such a high level of fail rate in our industry. And I think that keeps a lot of people from giving it a try. But of course, if you make it, you're in an exclusive group, and it's one of the most important things you can do, because you create jobs and livelihoods for people.
That's a great perspective to look at it. You're effectively supporting communities. And sometimes as you grow like you have, even more than just local, national or international, and that supports families, family units, giving back like you've done to philanthropy and many others. And by the way, in no means that I'm saying that you're a better person by being a successful entrepreneur. That has nothing to do with it. You may be a lousy person, or you may be a bad entrepreneur and be an amazing person. And like I said, only partially joking, I would say for most people, there is nothing wrong with being an important person inside a company. You're probably, on average, going to be more successful than an entrepreneur for the reasons that you noted. Most will spend and burn money and not necessarily be profitable, or be profitable, but they could have saved money and had a different perspective if they worked inside a company that may have made them more financially successful. So in no way is being an entrepreneur better in terms of person, or potentially even from a financial perspective. That being said, back a little bit to that question. Do you think there's something that we're born with a specific gene inside us, or it's more to do with our environment, whether parents, mentors, others around us, and it's a learned skill?
Oh, well, the nature versus nurture debate. We could have that
age-old
debate for years. I'm not going to go down the route of DNA, because I know very little to nothing about that, not being a scientist. I would go down the route of nurture. Then it's got to be something that carves us, through our lived experience. So I think the fact that my parents were both entrepreneurs, that definitely helped. It gives you confidence if you've seen other people live that type of lifestyle of working 24/7 and not being able to take weekends and or vacations, that you're always available because your company's always on, so you always have to be on. And I think that made a big impact on me being able to see what the life of an entrepreneur was, so that I didn't get early onset burnout from the tremendous hours and all the stress that comes along with the highs and lows of being an entrepreneur.
I mean, yeah, from my experience too, I would say it's less internal nature with your genetic set and more something that you develop an interest and a passion on, and then have an obsession. Maybe that's a word I do like to use, relative to how do I learn this? How do I get better at it? And if you grew up in a family where you saw that, now that may discourage some people for the reasons I said earlier. Look at this early life of an entrepreneur, 24/7 stress, often strain on marriages. But then that may be good from that person's perspective to see that. What I will say from experiences that I have is if you had parents or other loved ones that were entrepreneurs, especially you saw the early aspects of it, you may not only yearn for that, you may say, I'm going to do this better. And you have the insight to possibly do that. So I would agree that that is maybe a lesson to be learned, may make that person even a quote unquote better entrepreneur. Related to all that, and I speak about this frequently, including at colleges, is unfortunately a lot of people stifle younger people in their teens or early 20s. Oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be a creative. You don't want to do this. There's no money in it. The odds of you being successful, blah, blah, blah. And people are pounded out of that creativity and sense that they could do anything. You could argue that might be a good thing and you're opening them up to quote unquote reality. But I mean, how many amazing people that if they listen to people that stifle them, we would not know of them today and they wouldn't have impacted so many different lives. I'm going to say that often goes back to parents, but potentially teachers and those around us. Were you encouraged as a younger person, or did you feel more stifled, but you overcame that anyway?
You know, I really don't remember one or the other. And I don't believe that anybody could have given me the enough encouragement to take on entrepreneurship, or could have discouraged me from taking on entrepreneurship. I do believe that comes from within. Just like if you have a drive to be a great artist, you know, a quarterback for a professional NFL team, you know, you have that drive, and nothing anybody tells you is going to stop you from pursuing that dream. So, you know, that's where I sat on that. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and it's definitely something that, you know, I take extremely seriously. You know, like I said before, it takes sacrifice. So, you know, when other kids were going out, you know, late night having fun, that wasn't something that I was into. You know, even to today, it's mainly just about work and family. And you know, what you do is as you build and the company becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, more livelihoods depend on you. There's more responsibility, and so, you know, distractions fall to the wayside, and so it just becomes the life that you live and breathe, you know, every day, nonstop. So if somebody has that kind of obsession, then that internal drive will, you know, get them to where they need to go, and outside forces, and it just becomes noise. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I like that last comment relative to outside forces just being noise, and knowing how to be focused on your goals and all that certainly becomes very important. You went to an Ivy League school, you went to Cornell. I wish that I had the intelligence to be able to do that. And I think there, of course, is value. Hopefully, wonderful professors, you're getting away from home, which you would get in any college, you get that independence, but you're getting, to me, the power of that network, your peers, your alumni, and how that could both inspire you and give you a network that could be valuable. That being said, and I always get hate mail whenever I say this, but it's a fair question, and I'm going to ask it of you. Do the Ivies and really other great schools, do they pick winners or do they create them? I'm going to skew a little bit more to picking winners because they're hard schools to get into. So they're, by theory, probably getting the top 1 or 3% from an intellectual perspective. And then the power of their network and alumni will help to propel them. but I'm not going to go as much on board with that they're creating winners. I could be wrong. I'm wrong more than half the time. What's your answer to that question?
It's a good question. I think there was a study done over a decade ago, so I don't even know what the most recent numbers are, but that as far as number of CEOs, there wasn't any statistical difference between the number CEOs that came from an Ivy League or came from a state school or some other kind of university. I have taken note that Ivy Leagues do turn out some very high-powered individuals. I mean, when you look at the number of presidents that we've had that are
Right.
Ivy League graduates, the number of Supreme Court judges that we've had are Ivy League graduates, that's where they do dominate the numbers. It's interesting that they dominated in the political and great authors and a lot of those high arts fields, but then not so much in business. It goes to show that, to your point, meritocracy that dominates the business world much more than pedigree. So meritocracy dominates business. And I think that's why you don't see a statistical difference there as much, because I don't think that anybody does business with us because I graduated from an Ivy League. The product that we put out in the marketplace is what white people, but and in fact, until you mentioned that, I don't think anybody would have ever known, and it's not really anything I talk about. I'm very excited about the work I do with Cornell. I've put a scholarship together for them that is going to help foster kids and kids that are adopted go to Cornell for free. I've been on their entrepreneurship board for over a decade, and that helps nurture entrepreneurs at Cornell. And then I've also been awarded their Innovator of the Year award in 2018. So I believe, the school has given me quite a lot. And I also believe I've given back to the school a lot on that. But then that just comes to your community. I think you can get that from any school that you feel a connection to and you want to give back to, because you feel like you took a lot from the education you were given and you want to give other people that gift. So, it goes back to what we were talking about before. Entrepreneurship is about the help of community, whether you're a restaurant owner and you're employing people, whether you own a gym, whether you own a national or a global company, and then you have the ability to go public like we are. And when you do get that ability to go public, that takes it to a whole nother level of community, because it's multi-generational. I mean, that's why we're going public. So the company goes on beyond us. I think, when JP Morgan started his bank back in the 1800s, did he ever imagine that JP Morgan Chase would have 240,000 employees worldwide? They're providing 240,000. And so if I think of HotelPlanner and where it goes in, 150 years, it's, we could be employing that number of people too out in the future. I will be long gone off the planet by then. But to think that I left that a legacy like that is something impressive. And, that drives me quite a bit. And I think that's one of the things that entrepreneurship, can provide. It's livelihoods, not just for the time that you're on this planet, but it's livelihoods well into the future. So, that's the kind of sense of community that we can harness and create, and then, grow and mature on such a huge scale.
Is there anything looking back, and to some degree it's an unfair question because no one's going to look back 20 years ago and remember sitting in a classroom at Cornell or any school and yeah, that really stuck in my head, although sometimes it does. But basically, what's the most important entrepreneurial lesson you learned at Cornell? I guess I'll give you a little cheat. Among the most common answers I probably hear after some pontification is some variance of learning how to think for myself, how to form decisions. And I use the poker example as we make decisions with limited information, and we need to adapt very frequently as we go along, as new information comes in. And there is an element of luck and there is an element of chance that plays into it. But again, I don't want to answer that question for you. To you, what's the most important entrepreneurial lesson that you learned at Cornell?
Well, as a body of work, going to school, also being a student athlete, having a job. I was a night auditor at a Best Western. I was a teaching assistant for microcomputing. So, that was just all about time management, which is big into entrepreneurship. I also belong to a very prestigious literary society called Alpha Delta Phi. And we had a charitable event every year called Victory Club. It was founded to raise money for war bonds for the war effort and for World War I, and then they did it through World War II as well. And I was lucky to be chairman of that charitable event, and we raised money for the local fire department. And it was an event we put on black tie event, and I do a similar one that I just did for our company down at South Beach that raised money for St. Jude's. And so it's funny that I started that sense of giving through putting on big events all the way back to university at an event that had been going on for literally 90 years. And got to be part of that history. But what was interesting about it is my employee force was all members of the society that were volunteers. And so if you can motivate volunteer workforce to do an amazing job and be there on time and get everything done perfectly, especially considering very short training window, then that's a good experience for what entrepreneurship's like. Because it's easier to motivate people when there's a paycheck at the other end. So, motivating volunteers. And that's why I think hiring people who have done community service and, I've managed volunteers is a great thing. I think, hiring veterans along those lines is a great thing too, because obviously, their leaders are motivating, members of the military that don't necessarily get their paycheck directly from their leader. So that's a different level of motivation. It has to do with charisma. It has to do with a shared vision. Sure. And that can outlast a paycheck, because as soon as the job market gets, hot, then they can obviously get a paycheck from anywhere. And I think we take a lot of pride in HotelPlanner having very low employee turnover and very high ratings from our employees about our work environment. And I think I've taken a lot of that from the time I spent with the Literary Society at Cornell.
Oh, that's an excellent takeaway specifically for you. I go back to how I ended that last question. Broadly to you, what does it mean and how important is the ability to learn to think for yourself?
I mean, it's the most important. It's funny that there was just a stat that said Fox News viewers are most likely to believe COVID conspiracy theories. And I was thinking, yeah, that sounds like a pretty negative headline, but that also means that Fox News viewers are the most likely to ask a lot of questions, right? Because they obviously are like, I don't trust this. I'm going to do some research. And yeah, I mean, they went down a bad rabbit hole and they obviously, came up with some bad information, but they did ask questions, which there's something to be said for that, if you look at it that way. And so, if I was to think about all of the things that you have to do on a daily basis to be a successful entrepreneur, one of the first things you have to do is ask a lot of questions. And you might get to the wrong answers, 49 out of 50, but that 50th time, if you get to the right answer and it's $1 billion idea, it's well worth it,
Oh, for sure, for sure. And yeah, I like your comment about learning how to fine tune and ask the right questions. Don't assuming that you're quote unquote having all the answers. You might have had the right answer that worked a day or a year ago, but again, like I gave in the poker example, conditions around you are changing. It's not math, 2 + 2 is 4. That's never going to change. It doesn't work like that, quote unquote, in the real world from, I guess you could say, my experiences. So you founded HotelPlanner in what year, by the way?
2004.
Okay, 2004. What need did you identify and were looking to serve?
Well, we saw that group hotel bookings was not available online. I mean, there was sites that were doing 1 booking at a time very well. But anytime you got into multiple bookings, it was a black area on the internet. So we wanted to solve that problem. And that's something that we've always done as a company. When we look at travel tech, we look at what problems need high touch and high automation. And that's typically where we go. Me having a hospitality background, my specialty is the high touch side of it. And then of course, co-founder and CIO John Prince is top of his class in computer science from Northeastern. He was an IBM senior engineer before joining HotelPlanner. He comes at it from the high automation, from the tech side. And so our two skill sets merge pretty perfectly so that we can, tackle some of these tougher problems that other companies don't like to touch. So right now, currently, we've done our 5th iteration of our tech, HotelPlanner 5.0, and we started the first of its kind gig economy travel reservation platform. And this means that anybody can join the company, and if they have a love for talking about travel and their city, they just have to put on a headset. We allow them to accept calls, and then we use AI to transfer customers that are specifically looking to go to the destination that these gig economy travel reservationists are familiar with. So it's an instant rapport, and that's bringing together that high automation with high touch. And when you do it successfully, it's perfect. It's exactly what people want.
I mean, I remember from back in the day in the 80s and 90s when you were considering launching a business, especially if you were looking to raise capital or get investors, you developed effectively a deck, a business plan. And yeah, it might have been like this thick. And in your era, in early 2000s, that probably adjusted somewhat. But I've noticed in the last couple of years, basically the decks are 10 to 15 slide PowerPoints, a huge improvement, I might add. But from your perspective as an entrepreneur, looking to create what you created and launched in 2004 versus, I'm assuming, making some investments perhaps in private companies now, or sitting on entrepreneurial panels at Cornell and judging and all that. Have you seen the business plans go from my day, like whatever, 300 pages, a little exaggeration, of course, down to something much more concise now?
I actually think that the decks have gotten longer.
Who are the entrepreneurs that you're meeting with?
Just the decks in the SPAC market, we were one of the shorter ones. But I agree with you that you should be able to say what you need to say within 20 to 25 slides. If it's more than that, then it's time to focus your vision down more so you can get it across more proficiently and not take as much time of your viewer, because your viewer is extremely busy, especially any kind of investor is seeing hundreds of those within a week. So,
yep.
I think that's respectful to investors to sharpen your vision and really say what you do that really makes you different. And I think our deck comes along that way. But I've seen ones that are massive in the 60 to 80 slide.
That's massive. If you don't mind me asking, going back to 2004, basically, how much did it cost for you to launch what you're doing? Depending on how you did it as an online intermediary business, you might have been able to do that relatively cost effectively. But as opposed to keep on pontificating, let me ask you, how much did it cost to launch?
We did it on a tight budget. We've always been bootstrapped, and that's where we come from. Sole customer service rep, when we launched, you're looking at him. Sole engineer was John Prince, and it was truly a two-man garage band back in 2004. And we emptied out our savings accounts, we maxed our credit cards, and then we raised a little bit of friends and family around. But all the money put in a big pile, amounted to only, 6 figures, nothing like the 7 and 8 figures and 9 figures that companies in the tech space raise today. And that's why we were lucky enough not to do an A, B, C, D, E round of funding from VCs or private equity banks. And I say very lucky.
Right.
Exactly, because when you look at this 3-way merger that we're doing right now to go public, the company that we're merging with, reservations.com, is got the same founder profile as us: one entrepreneur, one engineer, Yatin Patel, Mahesh Chadha, and they also bootstrapped. And so when we go public, the 4 entrepreneurs together will own 70% of our stock. And so that's a unique story and technology companies going public right now, and something that we're very proud of. That's why I bring it up right now, because anybody who's watching this, send it to a friend who's an entrepreneur right now that's thinking about taking VC money or PE, and you say, look, you're going to get diluted. It's not going to be your company that long, for that long, if you can go down that path. And then their response is always, but that's the only way you can make it in technology and travel technology specifically too, on top of that, because it is an expensive, very crowded space. But then you can send them our story and say, look, we're an example of how you can do it. One of the things that I always say is that when you're thinking about taking that money early on, it's hard to put in perspective that you won't make huge revenues in the first 3-4 years. So what seems like a lot of money, at that time, becomes small money into the future. And then you wish that, you had that equity back, but equity that's given up is almost impossible to get back. If you can ever raise money from the debt side, and people get nervous about debt, but the debt side, as long as you don't go overboard with it, helps you to finance growth without giving up very valuable equity.
Very good points. I think sometimes people are too quick to give up equity, not realizing if they gain some success, it may come back to bite them. Now, they may argue they wouldn't have had that success if it wasn't for the money and mentorship, potentially from whatever, let's call it an angel or VC. That might be right. That's what makes entrepreneurship both so exciting, thrilling, and so difficult. There is no one perfect answer. They're all snowflakes. They're all different. Going back a little bit to that question on your early days in 2004, and even the business plan that led into your launch, how different, if really at all, heading into year 2, did HotelPlanner look versus your original vision?
Well, it looked a lot different when it was just 2 people, that was for sure. And then, and mentors had told me this, you hit a wall when you get to 20 people too. 20 people, you're a nice, tight family. And to expand past that, it takes to another level where you have to start to integrate some mid-management, and that's not always possible for a lot of entrepreneurs. And once you hit 20 employees, you've been around for that family does create a really nice lifestyle business for a lot of people. So they don't generally want to go past that. They like knowing everything about their employees and what they're up to on weekends and everything else. And so it's very tight, like I said, like a really tight family. I believe we've done our best to keep, as we've expanded, past over 100 employees, we've done our best to keep that same grassroots family atmosphere, but allow the company to grow past that initial hurdle of getting past 20 employees. And so, now one of the big steps we made too was international offices. We started in California. We moved our headquarters to Palm Beach, Florida, which has been great for us. It's a booming area, the Southeast Florida area. Everything from Miami up to Palm Beach and Jupiter is just buzzing right now. So we're very happy about that move. And then, complemented that with a London office, a Las Vegas office, Amsterdam office. And then here I am in Singapore right now as we grow Asia. So along those lines, being able to not only put in some mid-management to help growth, but also to be able to delegate any entrepreneur that can create, a revenue stream, and then knows how to do it, and then can train somebody else to do it as good, if not better, and can delegate. That allows for faster growth as well. So all of those things, changed the look and feel of the company. If you saw the early days, even just saw the web page from the early days, you wouldn't recognize it. But I mean, to be fair, I think there's a site called Wayback Machine. Have you ever been there? If
No.
you Google it, Wayback Machine, it actually has archived every single site that's ever been on the internet, and it archives them. If they're very busy sites, I think it archives them monthly. Less trafficked sites get archived yearly. So you can actually go to the first iteration of HotelPlanner and laugh at it.
I think we all would feel that way. It's like looking at our hairdos from 20, 30 years ago. Whatever hair that I might have left, I actually wish I could go back 20 or 30 years on that. Actually, speaking of hindsight is 2020, looking back now, what would you have done differently back in the early days?
There was nothing that I would have done differently. It actually worked out quite nicely for me, for the entire experience that I've had from the start of this business to today. And I, could call it luck. Could call it, just being very focused and not making a wrong step. But I'm happy where we were to where we've been. I mean, think about even the stories I've already told. I started in California. It's a great place. Then had a chance to move to another great place, Palm Beach, Florida. And then I got the chance to open up a London office. Now I'm in Singapore, which is another beautiful, great city in the world that's booming right now, and expanding Asia. And now next iteration is moving back to London, and to split my time between headquarters and our London office while we go public on the NASDAQ. And so I can't think of any better than to be sitting right there at Heathrow and doing the triangle from Heathrow to JFK to MIA back to Heathrow and go in that circle. And that's not a bad place to be in the world,
Not at all. Now, I know you effectively answered it earlier, but for those maybe students at Cornell and other colleges that may end up watching this, talk a little bit again about, early on you started with you and a partner and some family and friends round. We used to call it the old MCI plan back in the day. That's going to go over the head of anyone who's probably younger than 35. Talk a little bit about how, hey, there is value in bootstrapping. Don't be so quick to dilute your ownership at a low valuation. And then that goes into other rounds with potentially angels and VCs. And again, sometimes that might be the right call. But if you can maybe give, I don't know if a warning is the right word, but don't think that you need to have a comfort level of a lot of cash to start a company. You need to know what it's like to eat ramen noodles the first year. You need to know what it's like to mitigate expenses, yet also to grow. Why don't I hear from you, from your words of advice to young entrepreneurs, to don't be so quick to give away your shares, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so, the two stages in life that you have where you have the biggest window to be an entrepreneur are in your early 20s and your mid 50s, basically, before kids or after kids are out of the house, because that allows you to free up your time, and you have less risk at that point, right? Because you're not supporting other people with your income. So those are your two windows. To go back to the VC and the PE, a lot of people in their early 20s don't realize what a valuable window that is. So they're quick, to sell their time basically for free by taking on cash, that doesn't go into their personal bank account, goes into the bank account of the company to grow the company. But with every more money they take, they own less and less of the company, which of course accelerates the growth of the company, but at what cost to, that company no longer being yours. And you're essentially, every time you dilute yourself more, you're working more and more for free. That's the way that they're not,
Yes.
looking at it. Now, that's not to say that, hey, if you want to be a serial entrepreneur and you're thinking, okay, if I bootstrap this, it could take me, 10, 15 years to get to scale. If I raise multiple rounds of funding, I'll get to scale in maybe half that time, 6 to 7 years. And then, if all I'm doing to accelerate that growth is giving up my time, in exchange for that, then, it's not, that's something that everybody has to weigh. I mean, that's different for everybody. But it just means that have to think that your entrepreneurship windows are smaller than people think. Because assuming you want to have a family and kids, that's going to put, stress on trying to get into the startup lifestyle and being effective at that, because, it's 24/7 at every stage on it. You have to do, but the stresses around a startup in the entrepreneurship days is a whole nother realm of time commitment that is hard to describe. You have to live through it. Like you said, you have to eat ramen noodles and be your own customer service. So you're basically answering the phone 24/7 around the clock. I mean, is that different than my schedule right now, where I wake up at 7 a.m. and then I'm, doing investor calls, until 2 a.m., 3 a.m. No, but I mean, at least I'm getting that 4 or 5 hours of sleep in there somewhere. And, the company can sustain itself without me. I mean, literally in those early days, if the phone rings, you're answering it regardless of what time it is.
I understand that. And actually, going again back to those early days, I know that appears to be somewhat of a focus of some of my questions. You did mention it, but I still want to hear it again and maybe expand a little bit more. What positions were some of your early hires? And this goes to the fact of sometimes entrepreneurs, when they're very early and small, they try to do everything and think that they're going to be great at everything. There's people you could hire that not only will help you grow, they're probably just simply better than you at many different things. But you're the one who started the company. You're the entrepreneur. You're the Richard Branson, but you're telling me that Richard Branson didn't hire amazing COOs, CFOs, salespeople, and others that were better at that giving niche than he could ever be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely another advice for entrepreneurs is don't be afraid to hire people that are smarter than you and better than you, because that's the only way you can really grow. And I think one of our key hires at HotelPlanner in the early days was Bruce Rosenberg, who was executive vice president of e-commerce for Hilton Corp for 15 years. And when we got the opportunity, to get him to work for HotelPlanner and become our COO, that was a huge building block for us. And then for there, we added talent like Joe Groglio, who's our CFO, who was the CFO of Hertz and took Hertz public. Wow. We had Baz Lemons, who's our president of EMEA, and he was a co-founder of Booking.com. We have Tim Gunstone, who's our MD of the UK, who is an entrepreneur that started i4Travel, which is a major travel conference, travel tech conference and research company. So, we continue to look for that kind of talent. We've got the opportunity now as a public company to put together a very talented board. On our board, we have Dylan Ratigan. You might remember the name from CNBC and MSNBC had his own show, The Dylan Ratigan Show. We've got Mohsen Mazami, who is a executive with Cisco Systems for 15 years. Kate Walsh, who's the dean of the Cornell Hotel School and Business School, is on our board. Jim Wilkinson, who was Secretary of the Treasury and Chief Communications Officer for PepsiCo and Alibaba. And then Jeff Goldstein, who's M&A for Interactive Corp. Dieter Huckenstein, who was the CEO of Hilton. These are just some of our amazing board members that we have. So,
I would say so.
you know,
Wow, that's very impressive.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
no, taking that lesson, that's what we went after the best we could get. So,
yeah, you sure did. Now, I don't believe you started Hotel Planner directly from college. You worked, I believe, in finance and Wall Street. There are some people, I mean, look at Mark Zuckerberg, that goes straight from not even completing college to starting their company. So everyone's journey is going to be different. But in general, I would say most people go through the experience of learning what it's like to work inside a company where you're not the boss, you're not the decision maker. You might even simply be a cog in the wheel, but that's good. I could argue from an experience perspective. Talk about your transition to your first job or so out of college. And then you were probably what, 24 or so when you launched Hotel Planner. So that happened pretty soon after both leaving college and your first or second job.
right. As every good Cornellian does, banking in Manhattan is where you go. And yeah, I did a stint for a bank called Commonwealth Associates that specialized in pipes, private interest and public equity. And I was an analyst, so I was looking at business plans all day long, and then I report to the partners on my notes. Basically, was my job, and then it prepared me for writing my own business plan and launching Hotel Planner. So it was valuable information, and this is the world that comes full circle. I left that world 18 years ago, and it's funny that now you're in the SPAC world, and pipes is what everybody's doing alongside the. We ironically didn't do a pipe, one of the only SPACs that didn't, but that is what everybody else is doing. And back then in 2002 to 2003, they were considered rather rare, kind of exotic, and now they're very commonplace. And it's just interesting that I know a lot about that space. So that was valuable information, both when I started and to the stage we're at right now.
Thinking back into again, I think it's really important in the early days of your company, no one learns how to lead in a college. I mean, maybe indirectly as you become more active in student affairs and other things that you noted, but directly from learning lessons. I mean, I could argue it's historical, maybe, but for the most part, you need to be thrown into it. And how do you hire people? How do you motivate them? How do you get the best out of them? What's your empathy, your emotional intelligence? How do you reach in and get the best out of them, which is not only going to be better for your company, but going to be good for them and make them more money, more satisfied, etc. In other words, how did you learn to lead?
Oh, over a long time. Yeah, it's a skill set that takes a long time to refine. I think when you first get into a leadership position, you tend to want to raise your voice, because that's what leaders do. They talk like this, and that's what you saw in the movies, you saw a Braveheart speech or something like that.
Of course.
And
Great
you
movie.
think that's what it is, but that's not real life, obviously. I think a lot of leadership comes from leading by example. So if I work around the clock and I'm answering every call and quick to respond to every email, people will see that as an example, and they will emulate that. And that's one of the big leadership side. And then along those lines, kindness goes a long way. People tend to want to emulate kindness too. So, helping anywhere we can and helping wherever there's a need. Again, going to that, company is family atmosphere. That's part of, I think, good leadership as well. Leadership through a crisis. That's definitely has nothing to do with raising your voice. It's the complete opposite. I mean, we've navigated through two crises so far. We had the mortgage meltdown, and now we have COVID. And
Yeah.
we pivoted out of both perfectly. Coming out of the mortgage meltdown, we only were doing the group hotel bookings for one major OTA. By the end of the mortgage meltdown, because so much of our competition, couldn't keep up, and we worked hard and grew nicely out of the crisis situation, we ended up doing the group hotel bookings for all of the major OTAs after that one. And then in this case, we launched the gig economy travel agent platform, which is the first of its kind. And gig economy is growing rapidly, over $5 billion a year, and growing at a rate of 20% year over year, is flowing through the gig economy. And so with this gig economy, it's allowed us to hit record revenues in the first year out of COVID. So this year, we're going to exceed our forecast of 128.5 million net revenues, which puts us over 38% growth rate above, our revenues in 2019, which was a historic high for us. That all happened from the pivot out of this crisis. And that was all from the calmness. When you have that first call, and I can remember it like it was yesterday, when it was in March of 2020, and it looked like, we had a good heads up because COVID had started to shut down the travel industry out here in Asia before it moved to Europe, and then before it got to the US. So we were very prepared for what it would look like the minute the pandemic went global. But when we had that all hands employee call and said, this is going to be rough. We're going to all have to band together to get through this. And, we had to help people understand, that there was going to have to be salary cuts so that we could keep as many people on board as possible. And of course, that started with the executives that either took 50% off their salary or took no salary at all. And then, of course, it was up to some of the executives too to raise money personally out of their funds to lend to the company to help grow But I said to everybody that, just like the last crisis, if we keep our heads and we lead through this, we will come out stronger on the other side. Because what typically happens in a crisis situation is people lose their head and they panic, and then they make missteps, and they believe there's no business out there, so there's no point in trying, things like that. Instead of going, hey, if we can get business in this environment, imagine when we recover how fast the business will come back. And so, from there, we convinced everybody that it would be some short-term pain, work extra hard, but it'll all be rewarded on the back end. And it has been, because we've put together a great employee equity package from this IPO, and we believe we've rewarded them just like promised. And so, it's been great to be able to, make a promise and stick by it.
Absolutely. And you so perfectly beat me to my next question. I'm still going to ask it. You answered it, but I do want to show what's on the list and maybe have a little different perspective. The question was going to be, what were your biggest pivots? And I thought it would have been potentially relatively early on during the financial crisis for you, about 4 to 5 years in. But the one that's most obvious given your business and a black swan, like the unknown unknowns, it's the bus you don't see that gets you, one of my favorite sayings. And that would have been COVID. Your industry took a big hit. You had to make sacrifices yourself financially, the executive team, and really the employees, and had to ride out probably a really rocky first 6 to 9 months. And then, like you said, pivot the model and look for things to be bigger and better than ever, as that is a lesson learned, and how valuable that pivot was. But if you were so rigid, you and your board and your employees, you would have kept on doing the same thing that might have worked pre-COVID, but that isn't going to work as effectively now. But you did make that pivot.
Correct. We needed to make that pivot. It goes to, asking questions like I was talking about before, and, coming up with a lot of wrong answers before you find that one that makes sense. So all this time during COVID, because group was decimated more than, even individual travel was, and group
Yeah.
was our core business going into COVID. And we had to just think, somebody out there is staying in hotels because hotels are open. Who is that customer and how do we get to them? And then our engineers went to work to try to solve that question by, building some pretty sophisticated AI to, put us in front of those customers. And then, of course, the big billion-dollar idea that came from asking that question was the gig economy travel agent, because reservation platform, because we knew people were going to want to talk to locals because they're the people who are going to have the most information on what's going on the ground in the area that's related to where that person's traveling to. And so that was just brilliant. And of course, the AI ties into that because it's connecting that customer who's going to that destination with a reservationist that's available that has the most information about that destination. And that all has to happen on real time. So, that's where that AI comes in. And when I say AI, I mean artificial intelligence, obviously. And that's one of the things that's just unique to us. So I want to just continue to keep asking questions like that. And we have so many talented people at the company. The answers that come back will, take us to the next level. And there'll be a HotelPlanner 6.0 that will be even more brilliant than our HotelPlanner 1.0 and 2.0.
And I mean, going back a little bit to early on in a company, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, early business owners, whatever you want to call them, they sometimes gravely underestimate what the great Peter Drucker says much more eloquently than me, but basically comes down to innovate, market, and sell. I don't know how, but somehow selling has become kind of a dirty word. If you're not bringing in revenue to the company, you may have a very expensive and very lofty intellectual hobby, but you probably don't have a company. You need to be able to drive revenue. As an entrepreneur, you should be able to do that at core, but then you should hire people that are really, really good at it. Talk a little bit about the importance of not getting caught up in the intellectual aspect, the morality of it. You damn well better market and drive sales or it ain't going to work.
I can agree with that. I also, though, believe that a good product sells itself. And a good product is built on KISS, keep it simple, stupid. The best tech is intuitive. It doesn't have, anybody can use it at the base level. And I mean, I'm not the first to say that. That was what Steve Jobs, sought to do with all the products that he was pushing out. And that's definitely part of the core of what our engineers try to do at HotelPlanner. One of the things that separates us out of the market when we're trying to solve these travel tech problems that are more complex, the high touch with high automation, is make it so that a first-time user doesn't have to pick up the phone or doesn't have to go to a frequently asked questions. It just seamlessly works and it takes them through the process. And they're done before they even knew they started. And of course, then they're happy that they've accomplished something that they thought was complex and that we made it simple. So that's my best advice to any entrepreneur is always look at this everything. And Elon Musk says this too. The best part is the part you don't need, right? So he likes to break down everything to a molecular level, every part, and then tries to see what he can remove to make it simpler. Because if you don't need that part, then there's one less part that can break, right? And there's one less thing that needs to be installed, which is less cost, and the cost of that item is removed too. So you're simplifying everything. And that's what we've done over and over and over with all our iterations of our tech is we see other companies adding steps. It's like, what step is it necessary? How can we make this shorter and simpler to save people, time, and in conjunction, you saving money too. And so the faster we can get them through a process and the more intuitive it is and the simpler it is, the more they enjoy it. And they get to the good part, which is, talking about the experience and looking at how much money they're saving and all those things that make people smile, not frustrating tech questions.
Absolutely. I do want to be respectful of time. I have a couple of questions. We'll go maybe round robin pretty quickly on them. I like to ask entrepreneurs, really all successful people, because I think we all could learn. And it's all different. I get it. But do you have what you would call a daily routine? You hinted at part of it, getting up at 7 and having some level of structure. Do you practice intermittent fasting? Do you run? Do you exercise? Do you meditate? Is there a certain routine that you may adapt here and there because it gets dry and boring, but do you tend to follow somewhat of a structure like that?
Yeah. So yeah, as I get up 7 a.m., do the things you do in the morning, typically get ready, immediately jump on the phone and emails, catch up with what's going on during the hours that I wasn't awake. Having a global company, it's a 24/7 job. I mean, I said before, and sometime around 11 a.m., that's when calls with the United States starts to die down. Then we start to work on Asia, somewhere in there, to have an hour run, middle of the day, pure heat. That's the best for the meditation. Run for an hour between either noon and 1 or 1 and 2 in Singapore. And that definitely builds your tolerance for heat and endurance. Exactly. So that's my meditation time, is that hour run every day, and then get back and then start to work on what's going on in Europe, because around that time they're waking up and getting into the office. And then of course, time for dinner, and then after dinner it becomes even more busy as the East Coast wakes up, and then you start with investor calls and company calls.
It's a busy
and
day.
Media calls. Yep. And
For
then,
sure.
Yeah.
I did have in my list, but we already covered it. But I think it's important for people thinking through entrepreneurship to ask, one, how important is effectively mentors and a board of directors? You did answer it. You have an amazing board. And yeah, an entrepreneur early on, or even a business owner, may need to be a little mindful of what's going to be in it for them, meaning the board of directors. So that may require some potential options or financial perks that, again, could dilute. But if it has certain benchmarks about growth of the company, it might be worth it. And even for smaller business owners, a restaurant owner or something like that, it still helps to have kind of a tribe of mentors and people that you would respect and respect what you're looking to do to help give you advice. Does it mean you always listen to them? No. But you want to bounce ideas off and hear varying opinions and challenge your assumptions. So I do think that's important. We did speak a little bit about the impact of COVID, which for your business was very significant in your pivot there. I suppose I will ask you, do you invest in earlier stage entrepreneurs and startups, direct companies? And what do you maybe look for in such an opportunity?
We try to buy early stage companies. We don't typically become a minority shareholder, just because we can't add a lot of value for that as much as other people can. We just don't have the bandwidth to put a ton of effort and time on our side if we're only going to have a small percentage of the company. That could change, though. We'll see if the right opportunity comes up. Then we could take a minority stake. But for the most part, when we're looking at early startups, we typically would just want to buy the company and help them grow, and obviously still allow the entrepreneur to make a ton of gains within our company. So aggressive earnout, so they can still actualize over years everything they wanted to achieve and the money they wanted to make, but just within our company, instead of us as just a small percentage owner with several other owners. That's typically how we've done it. And then of course, we've acquired 7 companies in the last 7 years, and this is a 3-way merger, so you can see we're not shy about putting deals together, and we want to continue to do that.
If starting a business now, how are things different than when you launched, whatever, 18 or so years ago, both from your experiences and, like you said, investing and buying majority interest in earlier stage companies that are starting to take off? Is it still much the same, or have things changed?
They're always changing. So, the early days, the travel tech community was small. Not very many companies were publicly traded at the time that we were starting. And, that had all changed, where the big publicly traded companies became behemoths, and then there was all this consolidation. Then there was kind of a hiatus of any big M&A, a couple of deals here and there, but nothing compared to the way that there was a deal almost announced every other month in the later a decade ago. So I think we'll see probably another round of heating up, because history does repeat itself, where you're getting, especially due to the SPAC boom, because there's a lot of travel tech companies that came out alongside us, Cvent, Inspirato, Vacasa, that are also going public right now through a SPAC. They're going to want to grow, and they're going to want to acquire. So, this is another wave of new publicly traded companies that now have access to, funds both through debt and equity and cash, and can and start sweeping up some companies to consolidate and grow. So there's a lot more names in the space than just the big two. Maybe you could say the big three if you add Trip.com into the list.
I mean, looking back 20 years ago, 9 of the top 10 companies in the world are no longer top 10 companies. The one that still is, and was, I also believe, the latter part of the 20 years prior, was Microsoft, by the way. I think actually 20 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg might have been, I might be a little off, but a senior in high school, let alone Facebook being, I think, whatever, the 5th largest company now. In other words, things change. Some companies don't adapt or pivot. Some do. And sometimes just new entrants and new business models are developed that could be very successful. I'm potentially thinking in the world of crypto and blockchain, that's going to be a big change over the next 20 years. Biotech, longevity, there could be a variety of things that could make it into a top 10 or 20 that we don't see coming. And that means if they're making it in, someone's being kicked out. This probably goes back to the bigger picture of pivot and change, and things never stay the same. But I'm assuming that you agree, in 20 years, the top 10 probably will be very different than they are now.
No, I mean, absolutely. It's going to continue to change as new companies. I mean, I think I want to say there's about 300 unicorns out there. I mean, all those unicorns, and unicorns, anything in the private equity market that's valued over $1 billion. Any one of those companies could be the top 10 tech company of the next decade or the decade after that. So, we have more innovation and more money chasing that innovation than ever before. So with, all that change constantly evolving, it's guaranteed that there's going to be changes to the top of that list in the next decade, 2 decades.
For sure. And I guess my final question, you spoke a little bit about it, but maybe concisely in wrapping up for the final minute or two, do talk a little bit about the SPAC and the 3-way merger. And just for those that may be newer to finance, or again, I have high school and college kids, maybe give the briefest definition in terms of what a SPAC is as well.
So they call it a reverse merger, where a publicly traded company buys shares in a private company, and by buying those shares in that private company, they essentially take that company public. The big difference is the SPAC, which stands for Special Purpose Acquisition Corporation, is a company that's made public specifically for that purpose. So all that company does is hold cash. So you have the founders of the SPAC. They typically have investment backgrounds and investment backgrounds in a certain vertical that knows about specific industry. they make it clear to the public what industry they're going to be going after for target operation companies, because that's where their credibility comes from on that. And it's a very interesting process because the original investors in the SPAC, some people think, oh, that's odd. People are putting their money in and they don't know what they're going to buy. But what people don't understand is there's a vote before the whole thing goes public. They call that the D-SPAC. So once the SPAC has signed the merger agreement with the operation company, they make it clear to the public that this is their target company, the one that will be going public and will exist past the SPAC once the D-SPAC process is going. And the final stage is that the shareholders in the SPAC, the people who have put up the money, get to vote on whether they want to keep their money in and approve, the deal moving forward, or take their cash out. And then, of course, the deal doesn't move forward. So there's a lot of checks and balances into it. I mean, people don't understand that it's not like, money's just out there and then there's some crazy guys and then they just talk to some other guys and boom, there's a company public. No, I mean, it very much works like a traditional IPO, only a little bit faster, only because the SPAC has done a lot of the paperwork and all of the heavy lifting of getting public before they even start talking to an operational company. So that's where the operation company, instead of it taking a year and a half to 2 years to get public, they can take 6 months to a year because the SPAC has just done a lot of that paperwork and all of that beforehand. But in terms of the traditional IPO, where a bank will then represent an operation company and then go out there on a roadshow and find investors, and then they raise, the 20-30% of the float, what they're taking public before the official ring the bell IPO day. That just happens, but in the reverse, those roadshow investors already exist with the SPAC. The SPAC merges with you, then it's your job as the operation company to convince those pre-existing shareholders that they want to be invested in you. So it's the same process, it's just reverse. Like, is that interesting, right?
Very interesting. I love it. Well, it's been a great pleasure to have on Timothy Hentschel. By the way, that is spelled H-E-N-T-S-H-E-L, co-founder and CEO of HotelPlanner and Meetings.com. Are really great to learn about entrepreneurship from his experience. We discussed quite a bit in a little over an hour, and definitely his company, what they're doing, how they pivoted, especially in that kind of business since COVID, and what they're doing in terms of their SPAC. So I found it very valuable. Timothy, it was great to have you on. I look forward to one day meeting you. Perhaps I would love to go to Singapore, so that may be on the docket. And I'm in Palm Beach and Miami quite a bit. So who knows what our futures might hold.
That would be great. Love to have you to our charitable event in South Beach too. That'd be great. Or if you come out here to Singapore, for sure, it would be great to meet up. Thank you, Angelo. It's been a great time.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure. I'll give a little bit of a brief close. Other than that, thank you all for being a participant today. Everyone, I'm Angelo Robles. I'm the host of the Angelo Robles podcast. We're a family office on YouTube. You'll find it, and a fair number of my interviews make it up on there. So hopefully you'll have a chance to enjoy that. I am active in social media to show my great interest in crypto and digital. On Instagram, I'm Angelo Robles Meta. Yes, I'm a big believer in the future of the metaverse. So you could find me there. I already mentioned YouTube and other platforms, LinkedIn and Twitter, usually is my name or simply at Family Office. You'll find it. A core company is familyofficeassociation.com. Look into membership. We're very active with entrepreneurs, investors, and family offices. I'm sure that I've been doing this a long time, that there's value provided from that perspective. But I like to give back as well. These interviews are great. Thank you again so much, Tim, and look forward to all of you having a great holiday season and seeing you all next time. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.